Hi, everyone. Good morning for everyone around the world. So, thank you for coming to this conversation, the third one from this project that is called Engineering Technologies Engage to Peace in Colombia, Reflection, Practices, and Futures. This project is funded by the Colombo German Institute for Peace, Instituto Colombo-Alemán para la Paz, CAPAZ. And we seek to investigate the scope, the limitations, and potentials generated by engineering and technological developments in the generation of conditions for build peace, right? But also to try to stop conflicts or try to transform conflicts in the very way. And this, we continue with this third conversation. We have two before in the last months. And right now we have the first one in English. So I will thank to the people that accept our invitations. And we will be here with Carolina Rojas from Engineer for Change. She is from Panama. And also we'll be here with Donna Rayleigh. She's the new Dean of Engineering at University of New Mexico. And also we will have here Maricel Maqueda Lopez. She is the head of Peace Tech Division at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Lausanne. So thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us in this conversation. We will have a really good place to learn from you, to just have this conversation around peace and engineer in this context that right now Colombia has another conversation with armed groups in Colombia, specifically the ELN, for example. 5 years ago, no, 7 years ago, we have the first peace agreement, peace accord with the FARC, and then we have to create insights to that conversation, right? From these sides, from engineering, from technology, that maybe is not common, right? So yeah, just I give the word to Carolina, our moderator today, and please feel free to comment, to make questions. This will be open conversation, not today, also in the future. We hope to continue this process in the future with these great researchers, but also with their communities, their labs, their institutions. So, Carolina, thank you.
Thank you, David, for the invitation. I'm very happy to having this conversation with you, Donna and Maricel. Um, as we are talking about the intersection between engineering and peace processes, I'm very curious about how did you end up here in this journey, and what led you to this point. So I would like to see if you would share a bit of what has been your journey to this sector. So I think if we can start with you, Donna, and then Maria said.
Sure. So, I came to engineering out of a desire to work on environmental problems and environmental justice issues. I grew up in Los Angeles, where we had our recess, our playtime canceled in elementary school due to poor air quality. And so I became interested in working on that. And as I sort of came up in the 1980s, I saw some of the environmental injustice, the way that that poor environmental quality was not equitably distributed around my state and my country. So I became interested that way, and I think when I started my engineering education, one of the things that was just really kind of at the front of my mind in a way that maybe it's hard to explain for folks that aren't of my exact generation, but the threat of nuclear war in the Cold War between the U.S. and Soviet Union was extremely tense as I was coming up, and there were a number of media events that made that anxiety much higher than maybe for people just even 5 years older or 5 years younger than me. There were programs that made very visceral the impact of nuclear war on communities. We read Hiroshima on the anniversary of the bomb dropping. Lots of things like that were a part of my education. And so I was very concerned about international relations. And one of my first experiences in college was taking a class on science, technology, and policy with a nuclear expert named Frank von Hippel, who was very involved as a scientific advisor and expert. And one of the things that had been happening in the 1980s was during the sort of peak of the Cold War, when diplomats couldn't speak to each other and our leaders couldn't speak to each other, science advisors could speak to each other. And so one of the things that he described was an effort of physicists and engineers to meet and actually work out the technical details around arms reduction treaties, and really thinking about how to get that done, and then each party working with their own governments to make that happen. And so, and one of the things that he said as part of that was that it wouldn't have been possible to do that without the nuclear freeze movement, that the presence of activists that were, insisting on a freeze and talking about a zero nuclear weapons society provided a moral anchor for those conversations. And he always said, "Blessed are the troublemakers," because he felt that without those activists, it would have been very hard for him as a citizen scientist to do what he did. So that's just a little bit of a taste of kind of how I came to these issues.
Thank you for sharing, Dana. Obviously, the things that led me to this place are not the same. It was a different generation, but I see a very, aligned process on um, identifying injustices and maybe having that reflection as how does that translate to each of our disciplines, and obviously from our end, what do we do? So Maria Cel, I would ask you the same question. What was your journey to this point? What led you to have interest in this intersection?
Thank you very much, Carolina. Thank you very much for the invitation and for all of you to adapt to this not common time. I really thank you that you are connected so early. For me, it's more comfortable here in Switzerland, so thank you very much. So yeah, for me, it was not the same. I don't have the same path. Actually, I've done my bachelor in telecommunications engineering and my master in microelectronics. I've started a PhD in nanotechnology, so I was meant to join one of these titans of technology somehow in one of these branches. But I've always wanted to do an experience of volunteering. Like during my PhD, I was wondering what if I go to Africa during the summer and I see by myself what happens. So,
Maria said, "Can you hear us? I think you're cutting off a bit." Yes, I think we lost Maria Cel there. Yeah. Okay. Well, she hopefully her connectivity issues are resolved. Dana, maybe I can ask you just out of curiosity, what was maybe that I think we all have that first project or that first experience that says like, I am curious, I want to do more of this. What was that for you? You're muted. I just it's okay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think the first experience, I'm trying to think about what that might have been. I'm of a certain age. I'm not sure what the first one is. I think that one of the things that was really influential for me. So as I said, I was interested in environmental issues, and I was always kind of unsure about which discipline to pursue my environmental interest through, right? So I kind of knew that it was important to come at it from a science and engineering background, but I also always had kind of one foot in the kind of policy space, or interested in taking action as a citizen, as a member of society, as and so I pursued that in both ways. And so one of the kind of this is a weird story, but I'll try to make it brief since Maria Sel's reconnected. But one of the things that I did as a first year college student was try to raise awareness about recycling. This is again the era. Nobody was recycling their trash, and there's no systemic way to do that on my campus in 1989. And so we got this kind of outrageous idea to have something we called a trash in, where we somehow convinced the facilities folks to dump a very large pile of garbage in the center of campus. And people sorted that pile of garbage by hand. And I still don't know how we got that past health and safety people, but they let us do it. And we wore gloves and stuff. And I think we had masks, but still I don't think they would allow that today. And we showed viscerally like how much could have been recycled. And that was an empowering experience for me, because it was maybe the first time that I had taken an idea and worked with a group of folks to kind of make it happen, and had kind of seen the impact on people, because people came by, they got involved. It was a very exciting kind of event, because there was this big pile of trash in the middle of campus. So I think that was something that really gave me that kind of energy around wanting to continue to pursue this stuff. Anyway.
Thank you, Donna. Maria, so welcome back. Donna was sharing her kind of one of her experiences of things that made her want to continue in this route, and I think you were about to share your experience that marked your journey when you cut off. So yeah, over to you again.
I'm so sorry, I don't know, something happened with the. So yeah, for me it was this experience during my PhD in Kenya. I've been working with street kids in really poor conditions, with really, a really small NGO. Actually, it was really, everything was really humble, and we had an impact on the community, but not really, like a broad impact, on society or a system. We were not looking for systemic change in that moment, and then I've become aware about a change, a transformation that was going to happen in my journey, and I've decided that at the end of my PhD I was going to work in sustainable development. So it is maybe a more easier transition for a PhD in electronics to go for sustainable development. But after working for 3 years in NGOs, also connected to the UN, in Geneva, I've realized that actually I was not addressing the root of the problem. The root of the problem for this extreme vulnerability of communities was not per se underdevelopment. The cause of underdevelopment was in many cases conflict, violence, protracted humanitarian crisis. So I've joined 3 years ago this experience center within the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology of Lausanne. This center is the Essential Tech Center, and it is the only one in this institute that, I mean, the EPFL is, I think, the 8th university of technology of the world. So it is kind of like a pioneering activity, to do a center to harness science and technology in order to promote sustainable development, humanitarian action, and to complete the triple nexus, well-known triple nexus, promote peace. So we have the luck actually to be able to be transversal to the faculties of the university. So what we do is listen to partners who come with problems regarding to, in my case, more violence and conflict, and how to promote peace by means of technology. So once we understand the unmet need with our partners, local NGOs, I mean, you name it, we can go to the labs, knock on the door and say, you know, you have this technology, you are developing drones, you are developing AI, you are developing healthcare technologies, and we try to match the needs of our partners on the field with the knowledge that the IPFL has in order to come out without being tech solutionist, but somehow with something that is useful for them and co-developed, co-designed, co-implemented in order to have an impact at scale. So yeah, it is a kind of a twisted journey, but I'm so happy that step by step I've realized that I don't know, maybe the world has been always like that, but today and in my generation, we need to do something about climate change, about the humanitarian crisis, about the inequalities, I would say, or conflict. And today, I'm going to finish here. We are at 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine, no? From Switzerland. So, I mean, it is so vivid that we cannot keep developing, pushing the boundaries of knowledge for the pleasure and for knowledge. We have to do, or we should do something about it to improve living conditions for a society, or to avoid the planet is going to keep in dying. That is what is happening. As Donna, I've really appreciated your example. I really like this rubbish symbol manifestation. It's really nice.
Thank you, Maria said. I think you were now talking a bit more about definitions of how is this sector defined, and why it's needed for us to be defining it. So I would like to know from your experiences in both engineering and education and practice, what are the main elements of the definition of peace? I think it's very critical when we talk about these processes, that we have clear definitions that allow us to go to achieve goals. But at the same time, with that definition in mind, how are engineering, technology, and peace related? And how does that pertain to our disciplines, technical professional disciplines? So I'll first start with you, Daniel.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think so. Climate change is also something I'm very passionate about, and something that I've been teaching students about in engineering for almost 30 years now. Since 1994, I've been teaching about climate change in one way or another in engineering classrooms. And one of the things that I think has become easier and easier for students to grasp over 30 years has been the systemic nature of climate injustice, that the ways in which the effects of climate change are playing out, and the ways in which the causes themselves are rooted in injustice, is something that that students seem to understand better and better, and the need to really think about peace engineering as a systems issue. And I really appreciate Maria-Cel talking about running down root causes, thinking more systemically about these issues is exactly, I think, what peace engineers need to be trained to do, and to really think about the interrelationship between ecological systems, energy systems, transportation systems, food systems, and how all of these things interplay with economic and political systems. And all of these things interrelate. There isn't any linear cause and effect, that this is all an interrelationship, and something where we need to really understand context before we look to understand consequences. I think engineers like to understand the implications of technology, but I think it's really important for engineers, and peace engineers in particular, to be looking for the antecedents of the technology too. What are the forces at play and the power relationships that are giving rise to the technologies that we're being asked to design, or that provide the definitions of problems that we're trying to solve. So I think those are some key some key elements. Clearly engineers have to be a part, but I would say not the only part of the solutions as we start to think about how do we transform the well-being of people and the planet simultaneously. That's going to take thinking from our discipline, but also from lots of other disciplines. And so having that humility around who has knowledge and whose knowledge has value has to be part of the equation.
Thank you for that, Dana. I see you nodding, Maria said, that you have a lot in your mind as well on this topic. So from your experiences, what is your definition of peace, and how does that intersection look like between technology and peace?
Actually, this is a very good question, because we have founded this Peace Tech division with the Essential Tech Center, and we are working. Lausanne is really close to Geneva. We are less than 70 kilometers far away, and Geneva is considered to be a hotspot to speak about peace building, peacemaking, peace practices, policies. So even if we were coming with a really with the will to make a change, to collaborate, to contribute, often we didn't find our place so easily, because we are not experts in peace. So it was like, you're an engineer, you're a doctor, you're a mathematician, you're a physicist. How are you going to speak about like a definition such as peace? You don't know what peace is. And we have realized that it was sometimes, for issues so complicated, so complex, so with so many drivers, triggers, indicate something so complex as peace, we were not included in the equation, even if only with multiple stakeholders we can address the problem. So it was a problem of communication and language. So in order to learn how to communicate better what we wanted to do as engineers in the field of peace promotion, we have studied, that is what we do the best at university, isn't it? And we have studied the definition of Johann Galton. We have based our framework in Johann Galton's definition. This researchers in the at the end of the 60s defined positive peace as the absence of direct violence, structural violence, and cultural violence. Direct violence is what is normally defined as violence, so when I'm going to harm you physically or psychologically. But he included other two kinds of violence in the definitions of violence. That is structural violence, when the marginalization it's happening because you don't have access to the basic needs, to the basic goods, to the basic services, infrastructures, and so you are getting unequal access or an unequal distribution to these services, and this is going to fuel at a certain point that you are going to jump to direct violence. Cultural violence is about harmful beliefs, attitudes, norms, regards sexual orientation, gender, religion, and it is this kind of marginalization or discrimination that is due to what you believe or what your attitude is. So we are addressing with our projects these three kinds of violence. For example, direct violence. We have recently received the visit of the Minister of Technology, Innovation and Science of Colombia, Mr. Luna Tapia. Was here, and we are drafting in collaboration with some universities here and in Colombia a project in mind action. So technologies that are going to avoid direct violence, because we are going to avoid this harm. To address structural violence, it is it's related with the distribution of water, access to land, energy, healthcare. So we are drafting a project in Malawi in order to study how corruption is a form of violence and how this corruptive system can create structural violence, so inequalities within patients that don't have the same access to healthcare. This is a pilot in Malawi. And to address cultural violence, we have just launched a project that is called the escalation of online polarization. So it is to gather and track by means of artificial intelligence and data mining, activities in Twitter, Reddit, and Wikipedia talks in order to see how polarized you are as a user, and to give back this feedback to users in order for them to increase their literacy about how to practice good habits in the internet, and being able to stop sharing misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, etc., maybe without knowing it. So in short, it is we are trying really to speak the language of people who has been working in peace, in the peace definitions forever, and kind of navigate within this framework in order to create our projects.
Thank you, Maria said. I have so many questions, but I have a couple of words in my mind from things you said, particularly systemic challenges, the need for, interdisciplinarity, and also the need for communication, and I believe also science advice. So I think I would really like to talk a bit about the intersection between science and policy. I will share a bit of a personal anecdote on this, and it is that I think I was educated in a very technocratic institution, where it was all about technology and not much about values and ethics in the use of technology. And I had an experience. I really believed that engineers had to be apolitical at the time. I thought I had to be neutral and just focus on technology. And I had one experience when someone talked, showed me, stopped me, and said that what I was thinking was not correct. And at the time, I tried to defend myself, but over the years, I've found that, engineers are not apolitical, should not be apolitical. We do need to advise. We do, and I think Donna, you said about recognizing your role as a citizen, and I think citizens, regardless of the discipline you are from, you have a responsibility. It took me a while to realize that reality and understand how does that interfaces with my discipline. And I think in our discipline, the intersection between science and policy, and science and diplomacy is key, particularly if we are thinking about the boundaries of technologies. We are seeing that tsunami right now of digital technologies, and governments and institutions need to figure out how to put boundaries. So I'm really curious as to what is your perspective of that interface between science and policy as it relates to engineering and peace processes. So I'll start with you, Donna.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said about engineers are definitely taught as you were. I mean, I was taught the same way about sort of this idea of being politically neutral, but that is an impossible thing to achieve. That really, what we perceive as neutral is really just the kind of status quo of the moment, the dominant the dominant outlook of the time in which we are living. And so, if you go back a few years or forward a few years, you might find very different norms and things that that look neutral today might look very, very political tomorrow. And so I think it's really important to think about that. And I know, one of the starkest examples of engineers being apolitical and it not looking good in history would be engineers during the time of the Holocaust, and they said things like, "I am apolitical," and it was a justification for the things that they did, which facilitated, a mass genocide. So I think that there are probably other examples of this around the world, but it is where that having that moral code that exists both within ourselves as individuals and in our profession as a collective ethic, I think is really important. That both of those things have to, first of all, align. And we do a lot of work with our students when we teach ethics and helping them understand their personal morality and their professional ethics, and really paying attention to how those align and not align, and then also distinguishing that from policy, right? So, so these things are all interrelated things, but policy itself is yet again a different question about kind of how we are thinking about, particularly around science and technology. How are we thinking about the direction and purpose of science and technology in a society or worldwide, right? There's international policy, there's nationalist policy, there's local or state policies. How do we want our waste streams, for example, at a very local level? I talked about recycling earlier. Where do we want our waste streams to go? How do we decide, where it goes, and who wins and who loses? I think is a central justice question. That's also that's a very important policy question to be asking whenever there's a proposal, right? Because these things have direct implications for people's well-being. So when we think about new technologies, and I think we're at this interesting moment with AI, where all of a sudden all this stuff is happening, and our ability, both locally and at national and international levels, to pause and really think about what do we want these technologies to do? What capabilities do we want? What things do we need to avoid? How do we go about doing that? These are all really important questions that are deeply intermeshed between policy and technology. And I think the same thing has been true of the climate debate this whole time, of who wins and who loses from different carbon reduction schemes, right? Who is going to restrict first? Who's responsible for the bulk of the carbon emissions to date? How do we think about these things? And so you're always going to have these policy questions and ethics questions and technical questions that are all layered on each other. And so, yeah, we have to get better at thinking about all of them, both I think individually and together, right? We need the experts that can really narrow in on ethical aspects or policy aspects or technical aspects, and we need folks who can integrate across them and think holistically about these as systems problems.
Thank you very much for that, Dana. And I think one comment you made, it's so important, that of communication. Like we need to learn to be better communicators and communicate across all of these levels. And I know, Marisol, that from Essential Tech, you are working on the realms of both offline and online environments as it relates to peace. And we're seeing now the consequences of no boundaries on the online realm as well. So what is your perspective on the need for you as technologists to be having a word there and supporting in the process of putting those boundaries, so that we can limit how we are furthering inequalities. Yeah.
Thank you, Carolina. I think that we say it often, but we don't say it enough. One of the problems is that we have been working in silos for real. People designing and developing technology was not involved or not taught how important and how pervasive, how disruptive technology was going to be. Nobody knew, maybe. So on one hand, technologists or STEM people were, working in their silos, developing really exciting and nice and promising stuff, but without considering at all things such as peace by design or the dual use of technology. We are not taught that. I mean, in my generation, we have here several examples. We were not taught at all about that. When you were in a tech institute, you were taught first of all that with your work you are going to make profit and not maybe have a purpose. I mean, if you as an individual student are interested, maybe you're going to get involved in movements, in actions, in studying this. But I don't think that we have received an education with this kind of essential principles about how you in your lab can cause disruption in the society. That is what we are struggling with today. Artificial intelligence. We have designed algorithms that have that are moving faster than policies are. We are far from being able to regulate this kind of algorithms as fast as we design it. So I would say that at the intersection of science and policy, the private sector should be much more involved. And this kind of more these changes, we were speaking before about interdisciplinary collaboration. We should maybe overcome the fear of communicating with policy makers or sociologists, and then with us, and to know that we have a common goal, that it is bigger, larger than the to work in silos and to push the limits or the boundaries of technology. Or, I mean, we are not going to be able to follow technology if we don't develop or co-develop new regulations with the expert advice of tech people as well. We have to sit on the same table and to be invited, and also to learn how to communicate in a way that is understood by all the stakeholders.
Thank you, Maria Cel. I think that now we're speaking a bit more towards the challenges to overcome in this sector, from including key actors of private sector, or also even the responsibility of engineering education, and the fear of communication, as you said, Maria Cel. So, from your experiences, Dana, what are the main challenges to overcome in engineering for peace processes? And how is your institution approaching it, or has approached it in teaching, research, or outreach? Any lessons learned you would like to share?
Oh goodness, there's so many pieces to this, and I'm new at my institution at the University of New Mexico, so I'll try to give an answer to both pieces. But I think the issue that you brought up about the presumed neutrality of engineering is one of the biggest challenges, that really helping engineers to really see what the contexts are, the politics of the context in which we work, that is so often hidden from engineers. And so the educational process has to, first thing, make students aware of how power does operate through and around technology. And as my colleague Ramiro Jordan says, who is kind of the lead on peace engineering here at the University of New Mexico, that any technology can be weaponized. And how do we help our students to see that and get the awareness? And I would say for students that are brought up in the United States, our education is very lacking in international everything. That our world history is not thorough. Our respect for other cultures is not taught well most places. Our just awareness of histories of colonialism is hidden, including our settler colonialism in the U.S. So there's so many pieces of of just kind of the context of humanity, of life on the planet, that's hidden from American education is important to overcome. I think that there's always the problem of the engineering curriculum that not only does it have this bias about trying to be apolitical, but there's just the sheer packed nature of it, that getting the time and kind of capacity in an engineering program to explore some of these other things is very limited and limiting. And then I think the last thing I'll say is about working with communities. I think that community-based work is really important to peace engineering, that engineers need to learn to work not just with other disciplines, but with non-academics, and to be very close to the land and the people that are part of whatever that work may be in peace engineering. And there is an entire kind of set of challenges around doing that in an academic setting. And it depends a lot on the academic institution, but the relationships between universities and communities is often fraught, and it's often layered with power and privilege that needs to be unpacked and dealt with over long periods of time, much longer than a single course allows. And so to have there's an infrastructure almost that's required that both empowers communities to really be confident in their own ways of knowing and their own terms upon which they will and won't work with communities. And so I think developing those and making sure that those things are in place before work begins is an important aspect that I'm not sure is always attended to thoroughly. So yeah, that's all the challenges.
Not just one, but a few of them. Yeah, a lot to unpack. A lot to unpack there, Donna. But I'll pass it on to you, Mariacel. What are additional challenges that you are seeing from your experience?
Well, I think, as Donna has said, there are kind of inter-organizational barriers. It's not only about language and communication dynamics, but also internal processes, resource mobilization, responsiveness. If you are working or you're trying to work from university with actors coming from NGOs, UN, funding bodies, governments, and all of them should be included in the equation of such a complex matter, we don't work in the same way. We don't speak in the same way. We have fear from each other. So, I mean, the challenges, apart from the complexity itself of the problems that we are facing, because we are speaking about how to promote peace and counteract violence and conflict online and offline, with these blurry boundaries that there are now between, you said before, Carolina, between both realms. So what we have done ourselves trying to face these challenges is to associate, we have launched what is called the Peace Tech Alliance here in Switzerland, and together with the Geneva Graduate Institute, they are experts in sociology, politics, etc. The Geneva Peace Building Platform, this is kind of a knowledge hub, umbrella organization with many organizations from Geneva under it, like local people who are working with local peacemakers, peace builders, etc. And recently this kind of like a premiere. I think the public announcement is going to be done tomorrow. But we are going to UNIDER is going to join our efforts. So the UN Institute for Disarmament Research So we have signed all together a letter of intention, but also a research agreement framework in order to say, we are coming from different angles, totally different angles to this problem, but let's set up an environment that considers net-driven innovation. So we are not going to throw once again technology to the problem. So that is, first of all, useless. Transdisciplinary and diversity, so include as many actors as needed to address each problem from the beginning, each problem and each project that we want to build, and do not harm a principle. So how we are going to address this problem, to use techniques and technologies coming from the university in a way that we are not going to weaponize, as Donna has said before, the solution. And I think what it has been discussed at the end is that we should carry out a kind of transversal monitoring, evaluation and learning process. It is so complex that we should not only follow up or try to check indicators, for dead people or for peacemakers. We have really to have this kind of transversal vision of the problem and the solution, and to follow-ups that are more overarching all this kind of indicators related with projects and related with problems. So this is our idea. Let's see if I will let you know how how it evolves.
Thank you, Maricel. I think from both of you, there are a lot of experiences to be shared. Obviously, you've been working in very particular and specific context, but on the purpose of, we need accelerated process to be able to overcome some of the challenges we're facing today. And this talk is related to, how can what can be learned to for engineering technologies engaged to peace in Colombia, particularly. And we have a comment from Alexander in the chat of which of the experiences in other countries could be replicated in Colombia and why. We know that there are some challenges to replicate on different contexts, but how can this be done? And from your experiences, what can you share, particularly for the Colombian context? I'll start with you, Marisa.
Well, I can give you an example, concrete example. We have discussed intensively with Ukrainian representatives in Switzerland. We have received the visit of the Dean of the University of Kharkiv last week or 2 weeks ago. With these actors, we are thinking about how to address the problem of landmines in Ukraine, how we could develop technologies in order to detect and remove landmines from the Ukrainian land in a more efficient way and safer way for the operators that are on the field. And I think that it is totally applicable to the Colombian reality. Due to this, we are also in discussion with researchers in Colombia and laboratories at the EPFL who have been working with the Universidad de los Andes, Universidad Nacional de Colombia, in doing mine action in a better way. So for sure, each context is unique, and Colombia, it is maybe struggling with a post-conflict scenario in some areas of the country, but for example, the common denominator here would be that you have still buried landmines in the soil of Colombia, and now leveraging on the experience that maybe we can get from the Ukrainian reality, this technology could be applied in both countries. For example, this is an example.
Thank you very much for that example, Maria. So I'll pass it on now to you, Donna. If there are any concrete examples or experiences you can share.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sharing goes in both directions, and so I want to say that up front, that I think that there's a lot of good work going on in Colombia that folks in the United States can learn from, and I do think the things that replicate the best are on the level of sort of principles and methods. So the idea of understanding power relationships, the idea of understanding global capitalism and neoliberalism and how it is playing out in poverty situations, when you are trying to design interventions that promote basic human needs and prosperity. You have to take all of those dynamics into account, and those look different in different countries, but the overarching global economic environment is something that affects all of us, albeit in different ways in different locations. But understanding those dynamics is key to designing effective interventions. I think that there are, attention to, the long histories of whether those are, colonialism or interethnic conflict or other kinds of inequality and gender inequality in a country. A lot of these things are, again, not the same in each place, but the overarching themes and the need to attend to those dynamics is going to be important in each place. And so therefore, when you look at examples of peace engineering in different contexts and different communities, then the question is always, why did something that appears to work? First of all, my first thing I would say is it's always good to be very skeptical about about people telling success stories about their peace engineering projects, because a lot of the times folks are on the political and economic reality is that a lot of folks engage in this work, whether they're doing it from NGOs or from universities or from a professional setting, they're all invested in continuing to be able to do that work. And so a success story is often the shortest path to having continuing support for that work. So one always wants to come with a critical view, and the appropriate thing, I think, for all of us engaged in that work to do is to be very honest about the shortcomings of each project and the lessons learned from each project so that we can learn more quickly. And again, that's kind of a best practice that we can do, but also understanding the dynamics and of the problem definition, who was involved in defining the problem, how the problem was defined, how the solution was developed, how it was implemented. And at each of those phases, there are going to be contextual details that may lend itself well to translation or not well to translation. And so really getting very sophisticated about that is important. But I do think there's a lot of examples around the world that can be borrowed and translated. And I know I'm not being specific at all, but that's kind of intentional, because I think I don't have enough knowledge of where Colombia is at in 2023. The last time I was there was 2011. So I'm not the expert in what might translate well, but I am familiar with the general principles and dynamics and the fact that there's lots of ideas around the world that should be translatable.
Thank you for that, Donna. And I will invite all of the participants to add your questions or comments in the chat as Alexander did, so that Donna and Marisa can address those. But I have one of my last questions out of curiosity as well. It is that, is again with words that you've said. I think, Marisol, you talk about the importance of a moral code, and Donna, you talked about the moral anchors and the phrases lessons are those. And then that you also in your last comment said about things that replicate the best are on the level of principles and methods. So I want to talk more. We talked a bit about the responsibility on the policy side of things, or in standardization, or putting those boundaries. But I think on a more individual level, what is that moral code and that ethics code that we need to have. And I think Maria Celia also talked about the do no harm principles. The medical field and medical professionals, they have the Hippocratic oath. And why don't we have similars, but I think they are often forgotten. And I believe it's something that to be able to achieve something as peace by design, as you mentioned, Maricel, we do need to rescue that in some way. And I think that you are both in the field, in research and academia and in practice, but maybe there are engineers that don't necessarily go through that route, but go through other routes. So how do we ingrain all these ethical concepts so that we do it in any way, in any practice we are having? So my question is, what is your perspective, or what are those principles that need to be ingrained in peace in engineering, or even to have peace as a concept in engineering, in the engineering discipline at large? So I'll start with you, Dana.
Yeah, I mean, I think, humility is at the top of my list. I think a strong sense of justice, and of course that term, when you sort of go into the philosophical literature, there are lots of different, just as with peace, there's lots of different ways people frame the concept of justice. But I think that a strong sense about justice, and I would sort of suggest, to really think about that in its complexity, right? That there are lots of different ways that it's constructed, and it's important to be familiar with them and think about them in turn. I think there's, integrity is really important. There's a number of principles that exist within sort of the community-based engineering world or the environmental justice world that would be important to kind of take on. I would point to, there's a group called the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization that's based in Chicago, Illinois, El Vejo, and they have principles that are very useful for their work with universities. So particularly as an academic, I pay a lot of attention to those principles and how those might be upheld in any university community relationships. I think maybe I'll just stop there for now, and I might think of some other things, but those are some places to start. I'll say one more thing. My colleague Yana Lambrinidou, who is an independent scholar who works with communities affected by lead poisoning in water systems, has written quite a lot on some of these issues about what moral principles engineers need to adopt. So I would point you to her work as well.
Thank you, Donna. And now, Maria, to you, what are those key principles that someone needs to be following in this sector?
Well, this is a tough question. I would say that the only two that I would say could lead more general principles that could lead to more specific principles, or to get more experience to define this kind of guidelines to how to be a better peace engineer, let's say. I mean, it is difficult. I cannot tell these guidelines, but I cannot stress enough the need for interdisciplinary cooperation. It's kind of linked to humility, as you have said, Donna. I don't know. I cannot say. Each project is so unique, and each context is so unique that I wouldn't be able to say we are, with this set of principles you are set, you can go. So just, to be humble enough to say, we don't know. Let's sit and talk and analyze, become all of us, as Donna has said before, kind of problem owners. We are not like, success stories, have lesson learned on the other side. And maybe the best is to own the problem, discuss about all the facets of the problem with stakeholders that are coming also from the context where you want to deploy your project, and see, because maybe in a context you are going to need more gender-based sensitivity. In another context, it's going to be I don't know. I really don't know. Each project needs to be ad hoc, to have this ad hoc approach. But I would say that for us it is more interdisciplinary and collaboration always.
Thank you very much, Marisa. I think hearing both of you, I was having like an image in my head. I don't know if you've seen it of this person that has a wall in front of them, and it has a couple of books, and as many books as they have, then they can see past the wall. And I think it comes to the point of um, being open to understanding context and learning more and understanding where we are deploying technologies, how do we design it, we would be able to see the bigger picture and understand like where it's going to be deployed and how are people going to be using it, the implications, consequences of those things. So thank you for those comments. And I will, since you mentioned the gender approach, Maria, so we actually have two questions in the chat realigned to a gender approach. We have two questions from Carolina Salcedo. The first one is, how do we think that from the ways of doing engineering, especially making designs and other results that respond to a need, you can appeal to the memory and female inequalities of a country? And she also mentions, like Colombia that has been so affected by the war, what elements do you think are essential to give a gender approach? So I'll let you both answer the question. I'll start maybe with you, Donna. What are your thoughts on Carolina's questions?
Sure. I mean, I think off the top of my head, I think about the way that violence plays out on women's bodies and in women's lives. So I think the first place to start is to think about sources of or origins, root causes of things like domestic violence, right? They often happen because of economic inequality between men and women. It is hard to find accountability if you have economic dependence on a partner who's abusive, for example. So, and of course, this affects women more often than men, not that men can't also experience domestic violence. But when you see other kinds of violence in society, a lot of times you see escalation in domestic violence. When you see greater instances of poverty, you see escalation in domestic violence. COVID has brought escalation in domestic violence as with other forms of violence. And so when we understand that systemically, then our interventions have to take that into account. Here in my state of New Mexico, we have a large number of missing and murdered Indigenous women. And it is hard to get accountability from authorities to pursue their cases. They're forgotten. They aren't on the agenda to even find out what happened to them. And so there is an activist campaign to raise awareness and to command accountability from authorities to pursue their to understand their fate and to seek justice for them, right? So these are things that, that inequality exists. And so when we think about interventions, whatever that intervention is that we're designing, if we're trying to design something that's meant to bring to meet basic human needs, to bring economic prosperity to a community, to improve well-being, we have to take gender into account, right? Otherwise, it is very likely, if we're not thinking about it, that our designs are going to continue to benefit those that are already having some form of privilege in society. So gender definitely has to be an angle as we think about our designs. And there are, of course, other forms of inequality that we'll want to be taking into account. But I think we run a risk if we're not considering gender of replicating sexism and misogyny in our designs.
Thank you, Dana. And Maria said, what are your thoughts on uh, having this gender approach in mind?
Well, we have had the lack of co-mentoring a project with the University Institute. It was called Technologically Facilitated Gender-Based Violence. I would say that there are a few options. Now, technology overall, I'm speaking overall about digital technologies because it's easier, but it applies as well to physical technologies. But we are developing tools in order to mitigate or prevent gender-based violence, either by means of denouncing with digital technologies or digital platforms when a violence is about to happen, or when you feel that you are in danger, or even to mitigate, if you feel harassed or abused in the digital platforms, so denouncing that there's hate speech, or that you are being bullied. So technology can either prevent and mitigate. That is kind of a more practical approach. But I would say that one of the main problems it is that, to be honest, I'm going to be maybe a little bit controversial here, but many of the technologies that we are currently using has been designed by white men between 25 and 55 years old. So how do you think that there is going to be an angle that considers the specificities of gender-based violence or prevention or mitigation if women were not included at the very beginning in the design, the development, the deployment of this kind of technology? So I would say, and maybe this is another principle, that diversity from the design, it is needed. So if you want to have technologies that work better for women, that include, or prevent violence or mitigate violence, include women from the beginning. Maybe coders or advisors or policy makers, expert in gender issues. So I mean, you cannot have an angle that cover female issues or gender-based issues if you don't include this diversity from the design.
Thank you for that comment, Maria. So I think I was thinking about a book called Invisible Woman, by an author called Carolyn Criado. It's Invisible Woman, or talking about the data bias in a world designed for men. And I think, yeah, I just thought about that when you were speaking, Maria says. We are almost towards the end of the session, but I have maybe just one last topic to cover, and it is we've been talking a bit about reflections and practices, but I would like to end the session on the note of futures. There is a quote that I really like from Hans Rosling. He was one of the co-founders of Gapminder, and he said that he was a very serious possibilistic. I am I am negative by nature, to be completely transparent and honest, and it has been difficult to remain optimist since I started to work on the intersection between engineering and sustainable development, particularly in context of poverty-stricken communities. But I think I always hold myself to that quote. He says that it means someone who neither hopes without reason nor fears without reason. Someone who constantly resists that overdramatic worldview, and that you are trying to hold maybe a worldview that is constructive and useful. I know our challenges are pervasive, are systemic. We need to work towards them. But in regards to futures, what would you say? Also, talking from the perspective of as someone that is just entering the professional sphere, what do you see the futures looking like, and what would be your recommendations for maybe people in the audience that are in this process as myself, and what are you what how do you also remain hopeful for the future in regards to peace engineering and this intersection? So I'll start, yeah, maybe with you, Dana.
Sure. I think I'm going to have sort of two notes of hope. One is that I have been teaching climate change. I mentioned this earlier. I've been teaching climate change for 30 years.
You're muted. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, you don't see muted, but
can you
we
hear me?
can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
We can't hear you.
Hmm.
Can you hear her? What is it?
How about now?
I can hear you both.
Oh, so it's me that I cannot hear you both.
Okay.
Let me
How about now?
Can
How
you
about
hear
now?
me?
How about now? I can hear you.
I can't hear you.
Hmm.
I don't know why.
Maybe the headset doesn't have
Yeah.
battery.
Oh, it could be. I guess we should probably keep talking so she knows when we're back. Can you hear us? No? No. And now we can't hear you.
Yeah, we're speaking about engineering and technology.
I know, right?
My connection went down. She cannot hear us.
How about now? No?
No.
Oh.
So yeah.
Well, while Carolina is like working on her
Sure.
device, we can continue the conversation, and then please,
Sure.
you're gonna.
Yeah. So one of my points of hope is that I really think that students now have a much sharper sense of justice. The students that I've been teaching over the years have often struggled to grasp questions of global inequality related to climate change, and I feel that since the pandemic, and I think the experience of the pandemic made them much more attuned because of that visceral experience that we've had of watching global inequality play out across the pandemic. I think they came in with a much sharper sense of injustice and a also a daring willingness to challenge it that I think is essential. And this sort of fits with this other. I'm going to also offer a quote from the great 1960s folk singer Phil Oakes, who said, "It is wrong to expect a reward for your struggle. The act of struggle is, I'm going to forget, the reward is the act of struggle itself, not what you win. Even if you can't expect to defeat the absurdity of the world, you must make that attempt." And I think that that's the core lesson for those of us that care about social justice and peace, is that engineers like to see cause and effect, but we have to act in the hope that our actions will have an impact, even if we don't live to see it, right? That there's a million folks that have been working on the issues that we struggle for before we were here. I'm quoting Phil Oakes again, and there's going to be a million when we're gone. And so we live in that hope that others will come after us and continue the work. But it is in doing the work that we build community, and that we actually can see real change in some of the aspects of peace, including that sense of well-being that we get when we work together for change. So those are my thoughts that give me hope.
Go ahead, Maria. So I am able now to hear you, but I was not able to hear Dana's remarks. So I'll pass it on to you, Maria.
I'm going to join Donna in one important point. It is that students and young people are getting more and more involved and aware. We have a course I think it is developing engineering or development engineering. Sorry, I don't remember by heart. And this year is the year we have had more students interested. From I think 25, we have passed to 60 students, something like that. It is nice to see that we are becoming more aware. I'm going to maybe to give the two answers I give when people ask me, but come on, peace, what do you want, what do you expect? So first of all, I think that always we have to balance forces. Even if peace, total positive peace, it is kind of an idyllic place to it is an idyllic place to achieve, but we have to choose as engineers, as scientists, as people working on STEM, in which part of the equation you want to be. If you want to counterbalance negative forces, or if you want to contribute to negative forces. It is true that we could discuss a lot about negative and positive forces. That is more philosophy than I mean, my background of expertise, but choose what you want exactly to do with your professional career and personal actions. And secondly, this some people close to me even have told me, but the world has been always like that. There is going to be always violence and conflict. This is a loop. It is it is history. It is built on this kind of struggle. But I always answer in a way, and it is the following. Due to the fact that we are struggling with climate change, we cannot stay in this loop of conflict and violence or not sustainable development forever, because the planet and the boundaries of nature are saying to us, no, you cannot keep in doing this. You have to do something differently, because otherwise you're going to stress too much the resources available. So we cannot have to change something, because we are reaching some limits that we cannot overcome. So I don't know if it has been clear enough, but yeah, we need more engineers working towards peace in this world and in this world.
Thank you very much for those words, Marisa. We are almost over, so I'll just give a few closing remarks here. It gives me a lot of hope in my work at Engineer for Change. We work with particularly young professionals that have less than 10 years in working and that are very interested in the intersection. Many of those have never had experiences prior, and these are the first times they do. We place them on a 6-month project with a partner, an organization, company, or else that are trying to push for technologies on both hardware and software realms. And I'm very hopeful, of things that you said today. I work closely with them on a learning program where we are trying to teach them at these intersections, and I think something we are really looking at the moment is that concept of ethics, regardless of your discipline or where you end up. I think one of the main conclusion for me from this session is the need for more engineers being mindful of the ethical consequences of their work, or even the ethical considerations as you go about your day and your work life. So I just want to say thank you for both of you for having this session and being very honest and open. I think these spaces are needed for engineers from different generations, but also young engineers, to be able to recognize that the work is possible, that you can remain hopeful, that there's still a lot to do, but there's a lot of track record already that we can learn from as well. So thank you, Juan David, for the invitation and the team. I'll pass it over to you. And thank you, Donna and Maricel, for this space.
Yeah, I want the chance to maybe, if you have final thoughts, like general, more openly thoughts, and we have like 5 minutes, 5 minutes. So if you have some general ideas, just invitations also from your work or something to stay on.
Well, from my side, I think you can check the evolution of this project proposal that we would like to do in Colombia. We will be in touch, I think, with regard to this. Really excited to work with people on the field there, and maybe to have this cross country experience, Ukraine, Colombia. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be interesting. So I would invite people to check a little bit our activities. And if you have, I have limited time to answer emails and so on, but don't hesitate. I really look forward to being able to inspire a little bit more people to join this kind of journey. So send me an email. I will try to answer.
Thank you, Azel. Donna?
Yeah, I'll just add, I didn't really get to talk about the programs that we, despite the question about what are we doing here, I didn't mention, we have a peace engineering program at UNM. We are part of a larger peace engineering consortium that exists in the world today of lots of other institutions that have similar programs. So we like to coordinate with those folks. We have a minor for not just engineers, but people outside of engineering as well to learn about peace engineering. And we also have a leadership institute where we're doing this through Fulbright. So we're hosting some folks from Argentina to come and learn more about kind of peace engineering in the US context. And they're connecting with Sandia National Labs as part of that experience. So we hope to have more of those kinds of international exchanges as we go, but just to make folks aware of those pieces from University of New Mexico.
Great. So thank you very much, Donna, Maricel, Carolina, for joining in this final conversation. This is the third one. There was already. Just the invitation to check out the last two other ones in Spanish, but for sure cool, like you can understand some things from folks in Latin America. And next in June, we will have a workshop about like peace engineering methods, but especially like a syllabus for courses, right? So for sure, we will contact you for some insights, for comments, for recommendations, for lesson learned, because you have already experiences there in your institution, but for sure, Engineering for Change that I have a large network of professionals and great friends in all over the world, right? So thank you very much. We will hope to also launch a website with all the project. So these conversations, the workshop, but also we conduct some interviews in Colombia in very universities around the country to try to understand the experiences in the field, actually. So the challenges, the I don't know, the results, the ideas that they had. So also we will put there in the website in Spanish first, but for sure we will translate it into English to make like the impact in other parts of the world. So thank you very much. We hope to just strengthen our networks, to stay in contact with you, and to just try to learn from each other and try to work in different contexts at the same time, I know. So thank you very much again. So take care. Happy day, happy week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Carolina.
Thanks.
Thank you, Maricel. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Juan David.
Bye.
Bye-bye.